Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Super Feeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I am very excited today to be joined by Caroline, who is here because I reached out to you after seeing one of your LinkedIn posts, and I was really intrigued by your lived experience and your story, and I really appreciate you coming on. And I wanted to say, and I can always cut this if you don't want me to put this in, but when I initially reached out, you said, I don't know if this is a good fit because our opinions are so different. That honestly made me even more excited to talk to you because I think these are the conversations we need to have, right? We can have differing opinions and we can talk about them, and it doesn't have to be this huge thing, and we don't need to, I don't know, make it taboo to talk about other opinions. So I'm so thrilled to chat with you today, and I was wondering if you wanted to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
So, yeah, I'm Caroline. I live in Australia, so quite a long way from Laurie. I'm 48 years old. I was originally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when I was about 18, so quite a long time ago. I'm one of those people who, as an adult, figured out that I was autistic and then paid a fortune to go and get a psychologist to tell me what I already knew. And I also have a very extensive complex trauma history. So I see all these things kind of mushed up and sort of a giant puzzle. And so I think that's me.
Amazing. Yeah, giant puzzle indeed. And I think it's a giant puzzle for most people listening. And I know that there's many of us, well, funnily enough, I have a lot of listeners in Australia, so your accent is very familiar. But there's also a lot of people who have, either received a BPD diagnosis or haven't, or have suspicions of autism like you did, and really feel like maybe that is the reason for who they are in a lot of ways. And of course, the trauma history we can't ignore when we talk about any of these things. So really curious. So you were diagnosed with BPD originally, or labeled with BPD originally around 1819, same as me. And then when did the autism stuff start coming out for you?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with BPD. It would have been 1996 when I was about 18. Life was extremely chaotic for a very long time. At the time I was working and I had a significant workplace incident. And it was a situation I was put in a situation that wasn't my normal role. And it was something that normally I could do. So normally I didn't do reception work, but our receptionist was away. And so it was like, Caroline, you have to be on reception today. And I knew how to do everything in reception. That's why they told me. But normally I would do it like for an hour on a Sunday afternoon when you might get one phone call, one person come in. So it was fine. But this was on a Saturday morning. There was a massive queue of people. The phone was going constantly. And I said to my boss, I can't do this. And she was like, you have to. And it was chaotic. And I ended up what we would generally call, I had a meltdown. And so we're talking like in a workplace, police, ambulance, work cover investigation. So really, really significant situation. And it was kind of after that, like I didn't go searching for answers, but it was like little puzzle pieces started falling into my lap. So that being the first one. And then over a couple of years, different little things falling into my lap, different things I'd read, hearing about other people's experiences. And I started saying to people, I think I might be autistic. And so there was that 2-year period. And then, I paid to have the assessment. And that was done. So that would have been probably about 12 years ago now. So
so there was like a 12-year gap almost between the turning 18 and then, okay. I think for many people with any sort of neurodivergence or even mental health challenges, we know things long before the professionals do, because obviously it's our own brains and it's our own person. So, but you went through the official diagnosis process for autism at a lot of personal cost, obviously. Was that a validating thing to receive, or did you need that for insurance purposes? What was the thought process there?
It was a little bit of both, but mainly I think at the point at which I did it, it was mainly for that validation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is always an issue as well. Those other, like being the access services. And it's kind of strange. So while we're talking, I'm just tracing back the years. So I'm now 48. So yeah, 12 years ago. It was like at that time, this whole idea of there being a missing cohort of women who'd been missed with ASD, it was just starting to be
Yes.
talked about.
Whereas now that's talked about a lot. Not enough, but a lot. Yeah.
But well, that's interesting because I actually find it tricky now. Like, so at the time, hugely validating, massive, really amazing. I actually struggle now. This may get contentious early on.
Yeah, I love contentious. Hit me.
I struggle now because it's become such a hot topic, particularly, people being labelled with BPD and then going on to be labelled to be diagnosed with autism. Because it's become such a hot topic, I often feel that I'm not sure I would seek the diagnosis now. Like it's almost like it's become trendy, and that feels.
I feel that way about ADHD too, in a big way.
Yeah, very much. And this is where, and I have said this to people, that I'm glad I went and got this diagnosis and got this all sorted when I did, because it would feel icky now because it feels like everybody's now running off and doing it. But I understand. It's hard because at the time it was so validating and so
exactly helpful. So like, who are we to take that away from other people?
That's right.
Exactly. But then you're like, but is this real? I know I struggle with that. I don't know about in Australia, but in Canada there's a lot of ADHD private clinics that you can go to, and in Canada we don't have a lot of private mental health or services at all, physical or mental health services, and it's great because people can access these diagnoses, and I'm so happy for that. And I'm like, but are you just diagnosing everybody that walks through the door? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it does make me slightly worried because it takes away the real validity of what this is if every single human on earth is getting diagnosed if they pay $500 or whatever it is to do the assessment.
That's exactly how I feel. And and I do see that happening here. Like, it basically seems to be that, but because people go in saying, I have this, I need you to tell me I have it. I've heard there's actually quite a bit of pressure for health professionals to push back and say, well, actually, I don't think you do. And if they did push back, then the person just keeps shopping around until they find someone who will say yes. So I think overdiagnosis is now a massive issue. And I think for me, like, so when I went into the assessment, so as I said, there was a 2-year period where I was putting this all together. And by the time I went into the assessment, I had I think it was 12 pages of dot points of why I thought I was autistic. Somebody joked somebody joked to me beforehand. They're like, the person doesn't even have to read that, Caroline. They just need to see I was an there. Really? So to me, it is a very comprehensive kind of a thing. And this idea now, and I think because I struggle significantly. So after that workplace incident, I did end up, I am now on the disability support pension, which is a source of deep shame for me, which I know it shouldn't be. I wouldn't think anything of anyone else.
Totally. I know. Isn't that funny? We take so much on ourselves that we wouldn't put on others. Yeah.
That's it. But that's where the whole autism thing, it's not cool and trendy and an identity and all that. I had this massive workplace incident and then other life situations. Like, this is really, really hard. And I don't see it as cool or trendy or any of those things. So, yeah.
Well, and I'm sure that workplace incident was highly traumatic as well. So even just trying to go back with the trauma of having police come and all these things, that's not easy either. Okay, I'm trying. There's so many different levels that I want to pull this out. So, okay, originally when I first created this podcast, I called it Super Feeler for a couple of reasons. One, because I identify as being a super feeler. I think some of the things about what I have been labeled as problematic are the best qualities about me, right? I'm highly empathetic. I'm deeply feeling. I'm a great friend. And originally I didn't want to just kind of pigeonhole around one label because even though I live with that label and I actually highly identify with that label personally, and it really means a lot to me, I think there's so many other super feelers in the world that their stories deserve to be shared. And I added the little BPD podcast on the side because nobody could find the podcast that needed it. which is the whole irony of the internet and whatever. We can go into that. But I know that you don't identify with the label, and if I remember correctly from the things I've read online on your LinkedIn, your kind of stance is essentially nobody has a disordered personality. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about what that means for you?
Yep. So to me, and again, going back to this whole thing of validation and that, I have been through that with the BPD label, because that was what I originally was diagnosed with. And yeah, my late teens, early 20s were just a chaotic, horrendous time. Multiple suicide attempts, multiple experiences of police coming, involuntary hospitalizations, all of that, like horrendous time. I remember that the day my then therapist handed me a photocopy of it was the DSM-3 at the time. This is in the
okay. Whoa, way back. That's dating you.
Way back in the 90s when we were on the DSM-3. But he handed me the photocopy sheets of the BPD stuff from it. And I remember that huge sense of relief. Wow, there's a name for this thing that I am struggling with. I'm not bad. I'm not the only person in the world. There's other people like me. So all of that really strong validation, I have totally experienced with the BPD.
Okay, yeah.
So I get that idea that people do feel validated when they get the label. But then as time went on, I then sort of started to experience the very significant stigma around it, particularly in the hospital and mental health services. Basically, over the years, I've developed from various experiences that I've been told I'm demanding, manipulative, utterly selfish, difficult, annoying, exhausting to be with, and scary.
Totally. And untreatable, probably. I'm just going to throw that one in there.
Untreatable.
Yeah.
One time when I was being taken to hospital in an ambulance, the whole trip, the paramedics were telling me how much I was wasting their time, and they could be out there helping people that really needed help. So horrendous experiences. So I guess that's a bit of a thing. And then one of the things I used to find very strange at times was a health professional or someone would say, well, you shouldn't let your mental illness define you. And I'd kind of go, well, you've just told me that my personality is disordered.
Yes.
There is no me separate from my personality. I am my personality. My personality is me. There is not another me hiding under the personality.
100%.
So how can you say my personality is disordered, but I shouldn't let that define me? And to me, that is a logical absurdity.
Yes. For sure. 100%. I agree with you there. And the system is using your quote unquote personality to define you every time that you interact with the system. So the irony of not being defined by your personality is highly, highly ironic. Yes.
That's it. So that's when I started to go, this is ridiculous. This makes no sense. And from there, you then start to ask the question, well, what does it mean to have a disordered personality? If there is such a thing as a disordered personality, there must be an ordered personality. Who gets to define what is an ordered personality versus a disordered personality? This whole thing seems completely ridiculous to me. I do not believe any person on this planet has a disordered personality. So that's how I arrived.
Totally. Yeah. I agree with all of that, actually. I personally, for me, having an explanation for why my life was so chaotic was incredibly validating, and it helped me access the treatment that I needed, and it helped me find a community of people who had similar experiences. So all of those things, incredible. I have struggled for years with the concept of if my personality is flawed, then I am flawed. As you said, there is no differentiation between my personality and who I am as a person. And I think in some ways, in that the name is so flawed, even though when people ask me if we changed the name, would all the stigma go away? My answer is no. But I do think that the personality disorder wording is actually the problematic part rather than the word borderline, which means nothing at the end of the day.
Yeah. Because I think that's funny that some countries that hasn't really taken off over here, but I know over in the Northern Hemisphere,
Yeah.
they tried to change it to emotionally unstable personality disorder.
Yeah, and I'm like, but that's not the part that's wrong.
It's not the problem bit.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So I'm in Canada and we still use the DSM, so we don't, but in Europe, yeah, emotionally unstable personality disorder, which fair enough, more descriptive. So in some ways helpful, but it's not actually emotionally unstable. I would argue it's dysregulation, which I think is different than instability. And why is it a personality disorder, especially given how treatable it is? Like this is the thing, is you can learn to live a life that is beautiful and well coped and less chaotic and totally worth living. And personality disorders, when I was in school in the early 2010s doing a psych degree, they would say, well, axis 2 means it's not treatable. Okay, well, DBT came out 30 years ago. So clearly that's not true, plus all of the other amazing things that you can do to heal. I'm super curious, and this is a contentious question, and I don't want this to come off badly at all, but I can tell you and I are going to be okay with contentious questions, and we can always cut them if they come off completely inappropriately. I am not an expert on autism at all, and I don't live with autism myself. I have a family member who does. I really don't have any area of expertise here. So, but I'm curious because you mentioned earlier, who defines what, quote unquote, an undisordered personality is, a normal personality, and who doesn't. And I think you're right. I mean, I think there's huge amounts of men describing what a perfect personality is, which is a woman who is easy to deal with and doesn't have opinions and isn't stubborn and all of these things that many people like myself are. And women who are trying to cope with trauma by being reactive is uncomfortable for people in systems of power, which is really what a lot of people with BPD are experiencing, right? Is this immense need to try and manage their trauma that has never been validated or treated properly. So autism, though, to me, feels like in a lot of ways, a different way of a brain working that doesn't fit with the norms of how capitalism and things want us to function, if that makes sense. So how is that different to you? Does that make sense? Does that question make any sense at all? Okay.
So I guess I'm not really big on the going down the whole paths of capitalism's the devil.
Yeah. No, totally. But it is defining normal and not normal. Who does that? You know?
So I guess to me, it's not a matter of normal or not normal. So I would say, with the autism, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder. I also have an issue how we seem to be conflating ideas of mental illness and developmental disorders and all those sorts of things these days. It's just got ridiculous. But I guess for me, it's that, I don't know, let me think. So you want to know, so for me, the issue isn't the matter of whether it's a difference or not. With the whole personality thing, it's the idea of a personality being disordered. I think it makes sense to say a brain can be disordered. I mean, so with autism as a neurodevelopmental disorder, that is something someone's born with, then you've got things like dementia, which comes on at later stages of life. That is a disorder of the brain. So I don't think there's anything, I don't think it would make sense to say there's no such thing as brain disorders. I guess the difference between a neurological disorder, like a disorder of the brain, versus this idea of personality. So to me, personality, I believe that there are 8 billion people on the planet and every one of them has a unique personality. And I can't see how you can get a line between disordered and disordered. And there isn't a magic cutoff line between has autism or doesn't have autism either. This is, again, because of the whole social media hype and that, Some people get really defensive about that and the whole ideas of levels and all that sort of thing. And again, I just go yada yada yada, because for me, it's trying to function in this world. Like looking back, I can see the interaction between the autism and how I've come to have such a complex trauma history.
Interesting.
I mean, right back, one of the most significant events in my life was I was harmed by a church youth group leader. And I can see that it's some of that social naivety and stuff that I had, that's how I came to be the person he picked rather than other people in the group. So that's where I think the autism and the complex trauma kind of feeds over on itself.
Yeah. I
also think like I have significant communication issues. So like I am very socially isolated. I used to I don't do it so much now. I used to describe it that people like me until they get to know me. And then once they get to know me, they don't like me anymore. And so yeah, really significant communication issues. I've never had an adult romantic relationship.
And what do those communication issues look like? I'm just super curious.
People often tell me that they feel like I'm interrogating them.
I get that too sometimes.
Just trying to work out what the hell they're saying.
Yeah.
And again, sort of looking at that developmental trajectory. One of my things that I wrote down in my pages of why I thought, from the time I was about 3, I remember being 3 or 4 years old, and my mum telling me that I was destined to be a lawyer because I analyse every word people say. And so that's where like you can trace it back. And I realise now that a lot of my interpersonal issues are because I do speak very literally. To me, I'm very clear and direct. I say what I mean and I mean what I say. And I cannot make sense of a world where people don't do that.
Totally.
Yeah, very significant communication issues that have impacted relationships to the point where now I'm happier alone. So those sorts of things, but I don't see, and other people, obviously, I mean, you can go and ask gazillion mental health professionals, they say Caroline's definitely borderline.
Right, yeah.
I don't see that as signs of a disordered personality.
Right, yes. Yeah, you may see some of those symptoms. Yeah, some of the what they would call symptoms. Like if you were to look at the DSM, you would go through those 9 criteria and be like, yeah, fair enough, but this is not a disordered personality. This is okay, yeah, right, yeah. That makes sense.
I mean, that's the thing. If we were to play tick a box, with the DSM-5, yes, I meet the diagnostic criteria for BPD. I would say, and this is where we throw in that other piece of the puzzle. I would say the reason I meet those criteria, some of it is who I am, which I would say is because I'm autistic, so very in my thinking. Some of the other ones, the whole makes frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. I'd say that's because I have a massive, extensive history of being abandoned and rejected.
Totally.
So I don't see that as a sign that I have a disordered personality.
Yes.
I see that as a perfectly normal response to the highly unusual experience of multiple social rejections. I struggle with chronic suicidality. Again, I don't think that's because my personality is disordered. I think it's because of a whole lot of things that have happened to me. So you see what I mean? So I do
totally
for BPD, but I don't think it's because my personality is disordered. I think it's because of things that have happened to me.
Totally. Yeah, I so agree. And I appreciate you kind of breaking that down a bit because, I think this is where, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this. This is where the whole CPTSD thing is going to be an interesting addition to this puzzle. But I mean, I agree. Like, I think that I have essentially always had parts of me that probably like physical brain things about myself that make me more emotionally dysregulated than the average Joe. And then you add on the abandonment and the neglect and all of the things. And of course, I'm going to react in ways that don't necessarily make sense to people who have not experienced those things. And then, the kind of, I think my brain, like yours, automatically goes black and white for almost everything. And I have to try really hard to see the gray, really, really hard. And then you think about suicidality. Well, black and white, if you're naturally prone to thinking in black and white, suicidality kind of makes a lot of sense, right? so the symptoms, I guess, to me, really don't feel, I think I've just kind of ignored in a lot of ways the language of personality disorder because I don't really believe in it anyways. Right? I use the label because the label helps me find community and help people and find connection and find treatment and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I'm like, this is just who I am in a way that is actually not a negative thing. This is me as I am, and I can learn how to live a life that feels less chaotic and stressful, you know?
And I think that's exactly what we were talking about in that LinkedIn post.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
because that's that thing that the label, as you said, it does all those things. It helps you access DBT programs. It helps you access community of people that struggle with similar things. But it's not being told your personality is disordered that does that. It's having a label. And so yes, with the whole complex PTSD thing, my personal view, I was really, really hoping that when they did the DSM-5 that they would make that change.
Yeah.
And I know
I'm so surprised it's not in there. So surprised.
Well, the argument that was put against it was, not everyone with BPD has a trauma history. My response to that is, how do you know?
Yeah. And what does trauma mean?
Yeah. So by definition, you cannot prove a null hypothesis. So you cannot prove that someone doesn't have something. So again, it's a logical absurdity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my question. So we've got the autism, complex PTSD, and the borderline personality disorder. I think that if someone is labelled with BPD, I would say, well, how do you know that it's not complex PTSD? If they said, well, I don't have a trauma history, again, I'd be like, well, how do you know, given that we know, stuff that can happen very early in life? So that would be the first question, how can you know? And the second question would be, have you been assessed for ASD? So my theory is that every person who's labelled with BPD is either autistic or has complex trauma or the two together.
Both. Yeah.
And that those two things, ASD and complex PTSD, could explain everything about a person that's labelled with BPD in terms of why they're labelled with BPD. And that's why the whole BPD thing is a nonsense and doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so fair. And I was actually one of those people where when I was first diagnosed, so I was, diagnosed 18 or 19. I can never remember. I should really try and find the answer to that question because I do this a lot. 18 or 19 was diagnosed, but I had had challenges since I was a small child. Like that was no surprise. Looking back at my psych records of when I was 10, I'm like, are you kidding me? Why wouldn't you tell me what was wrong with me then instead of pretend everything was fine? And then went to group, just like publicly funded group DBT. I've never done full program. And I remember sitting there and hearing about the trauma that everybody else had experienced and thinking, I haven't experienced any trauma. And I felt really like an imposter almost because I felt I hadn't been, violently raped or molested by a parent or whatever. And it took me a while to realize like, I had experienced a shitload of trauma. It just didn't look like what I had been taught trauma looked like. I hadn't been to war, right? Like at the time, PTSD was a war disease, and so I totally agree with you where it's like, how do you know they haven't experienced trauma? Because I think if you were to dive into most people, there's something traumatic that happened. And even your example of the workplace incident, there's hundreds of people where that wouldn't have even crossed their mind. They would have been like, oh, I love answering the phone. No worries. Right. But for you, that was a highly traumatic event. And so when we kind of are taught, and I maybe this is changing. It's been a long time since I really obviously first got diagnosed and was going through school at the same time of defining what trauma is. I think, the whole maybe they don't have trauma, so therefore do they have BPD? They can't have CPTSD is a bit of flawed logic.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's logically absurd. Because you can never prove a null hypothesis. You cannot prove that someone does not have something. So that's where I would really like to think that in the future, the whole concept of borderline or personality disorders in general will get tossed out. And complex PTSD be much, clearer defined and identified.
So, like, conspiratorially, perhaps, the CPTSD was a concept long before the DSM-5. We all know that was the case because we all thought it was going to end up in the DSM. Why didn't it, do you think?
I think, well, I mean, the argument that was put forward was that
Right, the trauma piece.
BPD has trauma. But yeah, as I said, that's really easy to knock over. I think realistically, I mean, I know, particularly here in Australia, there's someone in particular who he has built his whole entire career on borderline personality disorder. How does he suddenly turn around after decades and say, oh, actually, this thing I've spent my life studying, I realize now it doesn't exist. I've really been looking at complex PTSD. So I think that's a massive part of it.
Right. And those are the people who make the decision.
How could he possibly turn around and say, oh, this thing I've studied for decades, actually, I've got it wrong. All those people I've told they have a disordered personality, they don't. Bad stuff has happened to them, and the way they exist in the world is perfectly reasonable given the things they've experienced. I mean, how does someone do that?
Yeah, but you would hope. I mean, but why don't we just do this for the greater good? The hope in me is like, but we should be able, if we're scientists, right? We should be able to say we may hey, look, I learned something new and I was wrong and I'm sorry that I did this. And now it's my job to try and correct the fact that, like, I've spent 50 years studying something that I now know is actually not a personality disorder. Like, that, to me, that's the hope, right? Is like, why can't we do that? But I guess,
and I guess, I mean, part of that, I mean, the simple answer to me would be ego and pride. But also that question of scientists, is this really scientific? How scientific is, how scientific is the DSM-5? A bunch of people sit around and decide by consensus what will be in it or not. That's not science.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, I think it's much more to do with ego and pride and and it's really depressing. I'd like
it is. I know. I don't like. I know. I don't like it. But you're not wrong. I just. But okay. So, but even going back to CPTSD, the interesting thing to me is not so much that BPD was not replaced by CPTSD, because I wasn't expecting that. What I was expecting, though, is that CPTSD would end up in the DSM, because those are two different things. We can have CPTSD and not replace BPD with CPTSD.
Well, whenever I look at people trying to do that, like having the Venn diagram, I just laugh. Like, it's like they're trying so hard to find difference. Where I don't think it's different. I think, again, it's ego and pride that is trying to find difference, rather than if people just honestly sat down and put aside all that ego and that. To me, it's one and the same.
But I know people that have what I would consider like CPTSD in the sense of like had very like longstanding complex trauma that was not like a one-off incident or two-off incident, whatever, that I wouldn't consider like classic PTSD, right? I would consider it more complex, that don't have all of the relational challenges that BPD is kind of characterized by. So to me, that seems like a difference. And again, I'm not an expert in CPTSD at all, so I can't speak to it. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor, right? I don't have any of these things. But do you think that all people with CPTSD with that logic have challenges interpersonally? Or is that where the autism comes in?
I think, again, if you go back, and I've got to confess, I don't spend all my time reading the DSM-5.
As you should not.
I've read the criteria for a while. But
that's okay.
Remember, like, to be diagnosed with BPD, you don't have to tick all the boxes.
No, just 5. Yeah,
5 out of what is it, 9 or 7?
Yeah, 5 out of 9, yeah.
So technically, you could be labelled with BPD without any relational issues.
True.
So again, that's where it's. Remember, these aren't objective things we're looking at. They're made up ideas, and it's like, and so that's where all you'd need to do is adjust the criteria. Like, this is, I mean, that's part of the absurdity. Like, if you play around with the BPD criteria, and sort of look at all those different ways that you can get 5 out of, I think it's 9.
Yeah. 256 different ways you can present. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of like trying to figure out how these things are different or not. You would just change some of those the diagnostic criteria. It's
totally.
not rocket science. Which is very frustrating that they won't do it because of ego and pride.
Yes, totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially when I really learned how the DSM is actually determined. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away because I was like, wait, what? We are basically our entire psychiatry system in North America, at the very least, and Australia, relies on this
ticker box.
Like this thing. Yeah, it's so interesting.
So I think that is a scary thing. Like, I think that is part of the message that I want to get out to the world.
Mm-hmm.
That most people have zero idea of how psychiatric labels come about. So most people have no idea about the DSM-5 or how it's developed. So, and over here, and I'm guessing it's the same over there, the constant message for the last few decades has been, mental illness is just like a physical health issue and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just the same. Well, it's not the same because
you can't see it.
That's right. And we've spent years trying to kind of say that it's the same to try and destigmatize it. But the side effect of that, or the consequence of that, is people actually think these psychiatric labels are real entities. They don't realize that, yes, the DSM criteria, it's a ticker box that's created by a bunch of people sitting around a table coming to consensus about it. That is radically different to diabetes or a brain tumor or, a broken leg. So yeah, I think that's a big issue. I think if people had a better understanding of the whole way the DSM-5 was created, there'd be more outrage about it.
I have an episode with someone who talks a lot about how the DSM was created, and her episode's not out yet. So I'm gonna make sure that because that was the conversation that I just said was eye-opening to me when I went, oh my God, that's how it's done? Like, that's how these decisions are made?
This is relatively new for you to learn.
Well, this was actually, I recorded this 2 years ago and it just hadn't came out yet. It got like lost in emails and things, but it was relatively new in the sense that, I assumed that there was more backing to like these decisions.
That thing that I think that, because we've tried to make it like physical health and all scientific and that, it's not.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
And I do think that the whole, like, it's the same as physical health. There's so many reasons that we should still say that, in that, like, I think about mental health days instead of sick days. Like, those are still completely valid. There's still so many things that, like, we do. If you broke your leg, people wouldn't treat you like shit. But if you have depression, people treat you like shit. Right? Like, there's so many things.
But then why do you call it a mental health day rather than just a sick day?
Well, yeah, that totally. I usually do call it a sick day. But people who aren't used to that information go, well, just because I'm anxious or sad, I don't have a flu, therefore I need to go to work. So I think it's, there's still those conversations that, like, need to kind of get into people's heads. And I know, like, I think about people that are like my parents' generation, and if you said, like, I'm anxious today, I'm not going to go to work, they'd be like, suck it up, buttercup, what's your problem? But, even as a kid, I remember having, if I didn't throw up, I had to go to school. That was the line, right?
Yeah. And that is tricky. I'm going to be contentious again.
Yeah,
that
do
is
it.
Tricky because I was the same. Like, unless I was actually unconscious, you go to school.
Yeah.
But I am actually really grateful that I was brought up in that way, because I feel that it means I have been able to push through a hell of a lot of stuff. And I do wonder if, as a society, we have swung a little too far the other way. Yeah, I am grateful that I was raised with the idea that you go to school. I mean, to me, it's a source of pride that through high school, I don't know if they still do it. They used to give awards for 100%.
Oh, for like, I don't know if they do, but possibly.
We used
Yeah.
to do 100% attendance awards, and I got one every year for high school.
Right.
I feel
Yeah.
good about that. But I know I watch on social media sometimes people slam that idea because it's ableist and all of this stuff. And I get that too.
Yeah.
But this is where I think there's a middle ground, and
There's always a middle ground, right?
A little
Yeah.
far the other way. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, I am glad that my parents taught me, like, in a lot of ways, the show must go on was actually a very helpful concept for me, I think, because it means that I can power through a lot of shit and I can get to the other side, and then I might collapse. Right? Yeah. But I also think that, like, in a lot of ways, I was incredibly invalidated as a child, and it was not helpful for my upbringing or my future, you know? So I think, yeah, there's a middle ground of all of this. And the more black and white it gets, and I think this is the same with, like, so many things in the world are getting so black and white that we're never able to have conversations that are showing the middle. Even, again, like your initial message on LinkedIn, I don't know if you want me to come on because I don't agree with you. And I was like, no, do it.
That's
so
it. Yeah, you're right.
It's important.
And I think a lot of these things, you're right, that in saying so, yes, I'm extremely grateful that my parents pushed me through school. Yeah, and but I can see how it would have been good to be a little bit more understanding.
Yes.
And to be understood more. But that's what I mean, that now we've gone too far the other way. Like, and this is because, like, when I think back to some of my experiences at school, yes, like there were times, particularly like in very early primary school, like I would do the whole thing of, you know, freaking out, not wanting to be there and all of that. And it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm glad because I do have a level of being able to push through. So yeah, it is. It's that balance between pushing through and being understanding, I think.
Yeah, and it's the same with sitting in discomfort is important for growth. And sometimes sitting in discomfort that's, like, actively harming you physically or mentally is not worth it. Right? Yeah, I think it's that balance is very hard to find. The last year I decided I was going to take a pole dancing class. And I'm an anxious human who doesn't like a lot of things about myself. And I don't know why I thought that was a good idea. And I hated it. I hated every minute that I was there. I hated 2 days before it. I hated 2 days after it. And I kept telling myself, you've got to sit in discomfort. You've got to, you know, opposite action your way through this. You've got to what. And finally, my husband said, Lori, how much were these classes? And I said, it was $200 for 8 sessions. And he said, okay, stop going. Right? He was like, this is making you actively miserable every week. What the hell are you doing? And I went, oh, okay. And then I went to my peer support group and they said, Lori, and I said, but opposite action. And they said, this isn't opposite action, Lori. Opposite action means doing the thing you know is going to make you feel better in the future, not doing things that you know are going to make you actively hate every Wednesday to Saturday, every week of your life because you spent $200 on it. And, you know, there's a fine line there. And I learned it. Yes. And I stopped going and I was so much happier for it because it was a miserable experience. Yeah.
I guess, like, I mean, I'm thinking through, like, just as we're talking, thinking about my childhood, so my mum pushed and pushed and pushed. I had to go to school every day, no matter what. I would also become extremely distressed at children's birthday parties. I didn't want to go to children's birthday parties. I can now articulate that I was completely overwhelmed and like too much noise, too much chaos. I couldn't articulate that then. I would just scream that I didn't want to go to this kid's birthday party. It was apparently weird because apparently most kids like going to birthday parties. But
to some children's birthday parties, and I have not a clue why anybody does them. I hate everything about them to this day. Yeah.
But that was where for the first couple of years, so we're talking like kindy, so 4 years old to 6 years old, Mum would push me. I would scream and freak out. Mum absolutely could not leave the party, so she would be the only parent that stayed. And when I got to, I think Mum said it was like when I was in like second or third grade, she started saying to parents, Caroline doesn't want to go. And
Yeah.
so she didn't force me. At first she did in those early years. And her phrase was always, you'll enjoy it once you get there. Once it became apparent that I didn't, she then stood up for me in that. She said,
Yeah, good.
So I guess that's what I mean by balance. School absolutely had to go no matter what. Birthday parties, well, if you don't want to go, you don't have to. So to me, that is balance.
Yeah, and there is a component of once you get there, you'll enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
I go to yoga all the time, and sometimes I really don't want to go, and once I go, I realize I enjoy it.
Exactly.
Pole dancing, never enjoyed it. Not one time did I enjoy it. And so I stopped going.
And that's exactly why your story reminded me of that.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a thing, and I think that's the thing, like, and particularly like, as a child, like, if Mum wants to go, you want to test that theory.
Of course, for sure.
But once it became apparent that actually, no, I didn't, just like your experience with pole dancing, then Mum said no. So to me, that is the balance of
totally.
So just reflecting on it now, I can see that that's how it worked. School was non-negotiable, but any social stuff, if I didn't want to go, Mum didn't push that. And here I am as a happy recluse at 48.
Yeah, well, there you go. So I was wondering, so two paths that I want to go down in this conversation, and you pick which one we go down or which one we go down first. I'm curious what your childhood was like on this, and I'm also curious what autism looks like in your life today. So which one would you prefer to go down?
Well, I guess we've sort of started talking about childhood stuff.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I guess the fact that I'd have complete meltdowns at birthday parties was a thing.
Yeah.
And this use of language, one of my most distressing memories that I still think about whenever people tell me that I'm interrogating them and I don't understand what people are saying. So it was before I went to school. So I started school at 4. So 3 or 4 years old. And we were having a family dinner. And my sister wanted a piece of bread. And so Dad buttered her a piece of bread. And then I said, I want one, just like hers. And he buttered me a piece of bread and he cut it into 2 halves. And I was like, no, that's not the same. And we spent the rest of the evening, well, by the end of it, I was absolutely raging in frustration, trying to explain to my family. So again, I'm 3 or 4 years old. 2 halves are not the same as a whole. And I remember it and I feel the frustration the same. I'm now, 48 years old. I have 2 university degrees. I'm very capable and competent. I still know that 2 halves are not and have never been and never, ever will be the same as a whole. And I can articulate the argument better in terms of those words, the same. That is the issue. But as a 3 or 4-year-old, obviously I couldn't. And I was just raging. I could not see why the rest of my family could not see that 2 halves are not the same as a whole. And it's funny, so I very much remember that experience. And it was also as I started having issues and seeing psychiatrists and that, Mum would always bring it up as we always knew there was something wrong with her. And they would tell
interesting.
That was a very, very memorable experience. And I guess just talking about my mum, she rang me once when I was in my late teens going through all this. Apparently she watched a documentary on autism. And she rang me and she said, I think you've been misdiagnosed. I think you are autistic.
Interesting.
And at that time, I told my then therapist and he just laughed it off and he was like, no, I'm very sure you're borderline. And so that would have been, we're talking sort of almost about 15, 20 years before I got the ASD diagnosis. By the time I had the ASD diagnosis, my mum had passed away. But
that's too bad.
Remember that. So, so I don't know what she watched, but apparently she watched a documentary and all this stuff. It was like, you've been misdiagnosed. I think you're autistic. And so, so that's kind of hard when I think back on it, that it's like a missed opportunity. That could have been seen.
But you did try, right? You did bring that to your psychiatrist and were told no.
And immediately laughed off. So again, the stigma of BPD, you're borderline, not entertaining anything else. So I think probably in childhood, very much, those social issues. I can see that school at that time, the way schools were designed at that time, it worked perfectly for me. And I don't have children, so I don't move in the space. I only sort of know it from social media and that. But I gather there's a lot more sort of group work and exploring and rather than explicit instruction. So to me, the idea of sitting at a desk and doing 2 pages of maths sums
is great.
That's heaven.
Me too. Me too. I loved those math worksheets where you just did the same thing over and over and over again all day. I think about them regularly. That was my favorite activity. Yeah.
That's right. And that's where I think most of my schooling was that way.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if the reason kids are struggling more now is because it's changed so much. So from what I've heard of the way schools are now, I wouldn't be able to cope in group work and self-directed learning and all that. I just want to be told, sit here and do this page of maths.
Yeah.
So the school system at the time really worked for me.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's people that didn't work for and that this new option works way better for. But yeah, totally. Exactly. I miss those math sheets. And when I did my master's, I did love my master's degree, but every single thing was a group project basically for 2 years. And even though I loved 80% of the people in my master's cohort, it was so challenging to me. I find group work to be emotionally, mentally, physically exhausting.
Horrendous. And and I do, I remember, by the time I was in year 11, year 12, when we would do the occasional group work project, it got to a point where people who were happy to sit next to me in class and sort of hang out with at lunch and that, they'd say, it's not that I don't like you, Caroline, I just can't work in a group with you.
Right.
And I was so clearly there's something going wrong with my ability in group work.
Yeah. Because probably just the rigidity, right? Because if other people aren't doing things correctly.
And then I'd have to redo all their work. So me and group work did not work well.
No.
So and I think too, one of the things I have been grateful for when I read about autistic kids struggling now is so I am naturally introverted. I don't have any pressing need to hang out with people. And I get the sense that the autistic kids who are bullied more, it's when they're trying really hard to connect and being rejected.
Right.
I remember there was, when I was in primary school, that we had this thing that, you had to sit for 10 minutes and eat lunch before you could play. And I remember asking a group of girls if I could sit with them because I didn't want people teasing me for being alone. And they said, and someone said, oh, you can sit with us, but you can't play with us afterwards. And I was like, well, that's okay. I don't want to.
Right. Yeah. You're like, no, I'm going to sit here for 60 minutes. This is my happy place.
If it was the playtime, I'd go and read in the library. That's what I wanted to do. So I think that's why I got through childhood. I was teased at times, but I wouldn't say I was bullied.
Yeah.
And I think that's because I would be a really boring target for the bullies because they're like,
if you're not reacting, you're like, yeah, that's cool. I'm just going to go over here if that doesn't bother you. Totally. Yeah.
So I think, those kind of ways that it.
Yeah, you can see it from an early age for sure.
Oh, and actually, sorry, I'm just thinking, another one popped into my head was that I always connected better with adults than with other children. And which, again, I can now see led to the abuse situation when I was a young teenager.
Right.
It actually happened. It was the very first camp I'd gone on. So, again, could have started going to the church youth group when I was 12, kept saying no. When I got to 14, I was like, oh, yeah, I will. And within the first 3 months, I went on a camp. So it was a big deal for me, first camp, very anxious, hung around the leaders rather than the other kids. And that's how it happened. So again, you can see that intersection between the autism stuff and how things can go bad. Totally. And I think that's the thing, in terms of tracing back that whole autism versus PTSD and all of that stuff, there's a timeline. So that example of the 2 halves aren't the same as the whole thing is in when I was 3 and other things when I was in preschool. So you can trace it. Those sorts of things are prior to any sort of known trauma issues. Yeah. That's how I kind of work.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I to trace it back. Now I'm going back in my brain because I'm we have a lot of similarities.
This is really fun.
Yeah. And it's funny because you're the other similarity that I'm noticing is you're super engaging, you're super personable, we're having a great conversation, but both of us after this are probably going to go sit in a room quietly by ourselves.
Oh, this is the only thing I'm doing all day. It's only 10:30 in the morning. I'm done after this.
Exactly. I know. I had a friend that was like, "Oh, do you want to go out for play games after?" And I said, "No." Just shut up. The answer is no. And she was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't even know. I talk to people 5 days this week. I'm good. I'm going to just be by myself with headphones in for the rest of the day." Yeah, it's so funny. Okay, so then I already forgot my other question about what it looks like for you now. Yeah.
So I went from a child who hated birthday parties and all of that to being an adult who hates birthday parties.
Perfect.
So I am very reclusive. So I mean, I can tell you, I've never been to a concert or like hear a band play. I've never been to any sort of sporting match. Never sat in a stadium of thousands of people.
Yeah.
So
if you hate loud noises and people, it probably would not be a good fit.
Yeah, so no thanks. So didn't want to do the kid's birthday party when I was 4.
Yeah.
Don't want to do the concert when I'm 48.
Yeah.
So a lot of those consistent, and I guess that's the thing I like about being an adult, that I can choose that stuff.
Yes.
So
totally.
I choose to live a very quiet life. As I said, I've never had an adult relationship. And yeah, I am very reclusive. So I enjoy chatting to people. I enjoy it's good fun. But yeah, I don't have so my parents are both deceased, and when my mum died, she died when I was 28.
Wow.
Me and my siblings went our separate ways. So we were never close. And mum, again, one of those weird things, mum had said right throughout my childhood that she thought her funeral would be the last time the 3 siblings would be together.
Really?
She was right. So
wow. Insightful. That's interesting.
So it's about 22 years since contact. So I effectively have no family. I have acquaintances. I don't have friends. I don't do the friend thing because there has been multiple losses and rejections. So yeah, I have acquaintances, don't have the friends and family thing.
And is that distressing at all, or are you comfortable with that?
It's not now. I would prefer to have like nice relationships, but given how bad they've all gone, for me now I've reached a point it's safer to be alone than trying to connect. So yeah, in terms of some of the people I've lost over the years, I would very, very much like for them to come back into my world. But given that that's not going to happen, I prefer to be alone rather than try again. So yeah, I think that's it. I have my house. And I think that's the thing. So I have my house. I'll show you. I like the color blue. It makes me feel calm. So I painted my entire house blue.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, I've made my house my sanctuary.
Yeah. As it should be. That's perfect.
That's it. So it's nice. And yeah.
Have you done any I mean, I guess there's technically like autism treatment is a strong word, I think, from what I've heard about some of the behavioral intervention stuff that is super problematic and really unethical from what I've heard. But what about like between the BPD diagnosis and kind of recognizing autism, had you gone through treatment and things?
That's a long story.
I mean, I've got time. I don't know if you have time.
I have all the time in the world.
Okay, perfect.
So I now describe myself, I think this is actually on my LinkedIn profile. I describe myself, most of what I live with now is trauma I've experienced at the hands of mental health professionals rather than the stuff that brought me in to therapy in the first place.
To begin with. Yep.
And so the most significant of that is that I was in a very complex relationship with a psychologist for 16 years. And so it was in many ways, I guess you'd say, effectively a DV situation.
Wow.
Very, very long and messy story. But yeah, he was ultimately prosecuted through our Healthcare Complaints Commission for that.
Whoa. That's hard to do. That mean I used to manage a complaints department for a health authority, and that is not easy to get actual action on. So That's
So
wow.
yeah, so and it was like he'd always, part of the reason it was so hard to leave him was he'd always told me that I was too fucked up for anyone else to treat. So it took a long time. It was sort of, there was about 5 years where I started to realize that something was wrong. And when
Mhm.
we actually parted ways. So, again, like DV
Yeah,
situations, trying to leave.
of course.
Yeah. And then the tricky thing was after I did leave him, like how he'd said that I was too fucked up for anyone else to treat, it turned out he was right. So after leaving him in 2015, I saw 18 therapists in 8 years. And by the end of that, so traumatized, I won't try again. But yeah, but one of those, and it was a crushing loss. So the person known as therapist take 13, she was the person that I told about Fred. Fred is the pseudonym I use for psychologist. So I had told her over a period of months, I told her, detailed what had happened between us. And the plan was that she would ultimately make the notification rather than me.
So this was pre-notification. Okay.
Yeah. So, and as you just said, so by her doing it, it meant she was effectively the complainant and I became a witness rather than me doing the whole thing. So over a period of several months, I told her all the details of what had happened between Fred and I. I just didn't give her his name. And of course, she can't act until she has his name. And so you see, so we went through the whole thing. And then we got to a point where she said, we're done. I just need his name. So I gave her the name. She made the notification to the Healthcare Commission. And it's kind of, it's dark funny. She said that, like, she's never done this before, doesn't know what it looks like. We're going to do it together. She said that we probably wouldn't hear back for months from the complaints thing. Yeah, they called within 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
Fairly big muddle, that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that is not normal either.
No.
I mean, I don't know the Australian system, but I'm pretty sure that's not normal.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So, and then the crushing thing was that, so I started that process with Therapist Take 13. She said we would do it together. Soon after that, her mum became terminally ill and she resigned. And so I ended up going through this process with another psychologist in the practice who, by the time I got to the point of giving evidence against Fred, this other psychologist had already told me she was going to dump me.
Oh, my God.
She said she wouldn't dump me until after the HCCC had finished. But that's where I was giving evidence against Fred, sitting next to a psychologist who had already told me she was going to dump me, remembering that Fred had always said I was too fucked up for anyone else to treat. So you can see the level of mess. So that was Therapist Take 14 that was sitting beside me. So I then tried 15, 16, 17 and 18 and just went, can't do this anymore.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. So I gave up on the whole therapist thing a couple of years ago. So that is tricky. And obviously, yeah, even when I say it, like, because like it's a really big story.
Yeah.
But aside from that, so in terms of, so that whole situation with Fred, so again, he was my psychologist for 16 years. I don't even know how to articulate why we did it. That, like, when you think, yeah, because this is the problem now, that I've never been able to find someone to work it through.
Yeah.
And it's
because how often were you seeing him? Like weekly?
Yeah, weekly.
Holy,
and having a lot of
ingrained sessions. Wow.
Yeah. As I said, yeah. And that's where one of those final failed therapists sort of said that like the whole concept of therapy and that is so screwed up and scrambled from what happened with Fred. It's just not workable. So it's like you can't get the help to work through the thing because the thing is so that's where that's all been a train wreck. In terms of DBT, so I have a psychology degree.
Okay.
And so I've learned quite a bit about DBT and different things through that. I am intrigued. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I find DBT very cool. I think it's very cool. I went and bought the manual. So I bought Linehan's original
1993 text, the one with the black and red cover. I sure as hell have it.
Bookshelf. So I bought the treatment manual And I
Yep.
bought the original workbook, and then they brought out another workbook, which is now like this thick. So I've got that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've read both the treatment manual and the workbook cover to cover. I find it great. What I don't understand is why people pay a gazillion dollars to go and do it as a therapy. Why don't they just buy the book like I did? So I am curious to know what you get out of it, and particularly people who
Yeah.
pay a bazillion dollars to go and do DBT.
Yeah.
I sort of sit there and go, why don't you just buy the book and get it off Amazon?
To be fair, I did a publicly funded program that was not full program. Had I had the money, I would have done the full program. There's some irony there of, anyways, it's a
Actually,
long, yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
But that's the other issue I have. That during my find a therapist time, I was trying to find someone who did DBT, but they would all say they did it, but actually they only do the skills component.
Yeah.
Like when I'd say, well, DBT includes this and this. Oh, no, we don't do those bits. Well, then that's so.
Yeah. No, that's huge. So the one that I did was essentially like through our hospital system, and it was just skills, and the skills changed my life. I would literally not be here. I say I would be dead or in jail if I had not learned those skills when I learned them. And it's been a long time, 12, 14, whatever years since I did that initial skills group. And I am still learning them, and I'm still refining my skills and my whatever and practicing them. And I'm fascinated. I'm also the kind of person who's a complete nerd who wants to know the inner workings of all of the things. And I want to read the original manual, and I don't want somebody to interpret it for me. And I want to do. And so, I would go to my skills group with every single piece of homework done. I would show up early. I would have 14 different color highlighters, and a lot of people didn't. And so I think to answer your question, I mean, obviously I can only speak to me. It's kind of like I can only do fitness classes. I can never work out at a gym by myself, right? I think I need the motivation of somebody else to help me learn the things originally. And at the time, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to die. And the I'm going to die was a lot easier. And so I think I really needed that motivation. I think there's a lot of people learning these skills on their own now, especially online, which I think is amazing. And I also feel like the skills are only a component of DBT. And so for me, that was the only component I got, and it helped so much. And I'm fully on board with people learning the skills in whatever way they can. And we have parts of this podcast that are about learning the skills, and we have peer support that's about learning the skills. But I think for some people, going through the more like intensive individual stuff could be more helpful, which is, I think, why a lot of people pay the good money. Although it can also be incredibly harmful, like what you just shared. So I don't want to say that like it's always going to help, because it doesn't always.
Yeah. And yeah, that's what I find interesting, because even sort of in the private hospitals and that, from what I can tell, it does still seem to be that very skills based. Like it feels like DBT has been heavily watered down from what
it's cheaper.
Linehan, yeah,
it's cheaper.
Created.
It's way watered down. And my master's is in health administration, so literally about how healthcare is a business essentially, and it's DBT as a full program with the components that you've read in that book, right, is so expensive, so hard to do, because you need a therapist that's willing to be available 24 hours a day, and you need people to be able to pay good money for that, right? And highly specialized people, blah, blah, blah. And in Vancouver, for example, there is a center where you can pay good money to go and do a full program. But I don't know of any public services that have the ability or desire to provide that level of intense treatment in the way Marsha intended it.
Yeah, and I actually don't even know any private ones. I don't know if they exist. I don't know of any private ones in Australia.
Interesting.
I know private hospitals that offer DBT, but
but not full.
When you dig a bit deeper, it still is the skills base. They don't provide that 24/7 kind of support that Linehan said that if you can't provide that, it's should not DBT. Be doing this. Yeah,
totally. Here, like in Canada, at least, we're in Vancouver, British Columbia. It's usually like research is doing the full program, or highly paid centers, essentially. And there's only 1 or 2 centers that I know of here, but that's super inaccessible for people. I mean, if you can afford it, great, more power to you. Do it. Like, I have no problem. Like, that's great, but it's not accessible. I think one thing that's interesting about DBT is she didn't like trademark all of the skills. And so which I actually really appreciate. Some people who are, interestingly, like in the profession, don't approve of it because they think people can harm themselves by learning things, blah blah blah, without somebody else walking them through it. I don't really agree with that, because I think if you're trying to help yourself and you've got these great skills that are helping people, then you may as well learn them. And if they don't work for you, don't use them. But because of that, there's a lot of cool, accessible things out there that you can now learn on your own that are arguably, love Marsha Linehan. She, in a lot of ways, in most ways, she saved my life originally. But her stuff is very outdated and not very pretty. And, if you don't like black and white text on paper, which I personally really do like black and white text on paper, but a lot of people don't. So I think it really comes down to like learning style more so than anything, and accessibility. And to me, it's like, if you can learn them on your own, then do it, because it'll help you a lot.
This is what I think. And again, and I totally hear what you're saying, and other people said too, some people just prefer learning in group and needing that motivation and all of that. But I think, again, one of those messages I'd like the whole world to know is that reading the book, you actually are getting exactly the same skill as
for sure,
in a group. And different things will work for different people. But I think sometimes with therapy, it's treated like it's this secret magical thing that you absolutely must see a therapist to do. Whereas I'd like to get that message out that, you can learn these skills. Like, as you're saying, there's a gazillion places you can learn them, and you can buy the whole manual and workbook online. Yeah. So it's not magic. It's not like secret magical stuff.
And it, again, it really benefits the providers, and bless them, they've been to a lot of school and they've done a lot of things, but in a lot of ways I can see why they want it to be a bit more of a cornered market, because that's how they make their living, right? Whereas if you don't make your living that way, you can still learn the skills and they will still help you, and I see that every day. The other thing that was really helpful for me about groups, actually, that I that can't be replaced by a book, is I remember sitting in that group and going, holy shit, I finally understand what other people see in me. Right? It was like looking in a mirror because of the intensity, right? Like, I'm an intense human, and people have been telling me I'm an intense human my whole life. But you don't know that until you meet other intense humans and you go, oh my God, okay, I see it now. And so that was a really side component of group DBT that was so valuable, because I was like, okay, that's what I see now. Yeah. But peer support provides the same, and I'm a huge proponent of peer support. So it doesn't have to be DBT. It's just any peer-related thing where you're seeing yourself in others, I think, is beneficial. Yeah. So are there any other messages that you really want to get out to the world that we haven't covered?
To cover a lot in an hour and a quarter, haven't we?
We have, yeah. This has been so much fun.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'd happily do this again.
Yeah, right? Yeah, if we ever come up with we could probably talk for hours, but just thinking, is there anything?
It's getting those key messages out.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, making it more accessible, everything more accessible, and that whole idea, the whole concept of psychiatry, and that it's not some deep scientific thing that you must have studied for many years for, go and have a look at the DSM, and read about how it was developed, and then look at it. I mean, it's a pretty easy read. It is box stuff. It's I think breaking down some of that and sort of breaking that idea of, the health professional said I had this, so it must be true, and the psychiatrist said this, or the psychologist said that. I think we have so much access to information now that don't think that it's only for very special people who've been to university or something. It is accessible.
Well, and what's wild to me is obviously you and I are the people who will seek out that information to like for the rest of our lives. We love that kind of thing. And then I meet people sometimes who are like, oh yeah, somebody told me I had bipolar once, but I never really looked into it. And to me, like, that's a foreign concept. I can't imagine. So I think, again, it just comes down to like who you are. And we both obviously love information. And then the other message that I would like just to share at the end of this is I firmly believe, regardless of the diagnosis label itself, whether it's autism, whether it's BPD, whether it's ADHD, whether it's depression, if a provider gives you that diagnosis label and it doesn't serve you in some way and you don't feel connected to it, you don't need to use it. It's their perspective on who you are from the hour that they spent with you. And if you come out of that going, that's not me, and I don't like having that label about me, then you can just say, I don't identify with that. There's obviously, I mean, it ends up on your little chart sometimes, and then that causes stigma, and we could get into that for 3 hours probably, but I don't want people to feel like just because one person in a medical coat told you you are something, that you have to use that as something you are for the rest of your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess that as you say that, again, I sort of think back to what we were talking about mental illness being the same or not as physical illness. To me, that highlights the difference. That yes, if a health professional says you have BPD, you can choose whether you accept that label or not, and it is just a label that they've given you. But if someone tells you have cancer, again, you can choose to accept it or not, but there will be very significant physical consequences, including potentially death from it. So there again, it's that difference. Is there such a thing as objective reality? I would say that if health professionals are telling you you have cancer, you might want to believe them. Whereas in mental health land, it to me it's all made up. And so you are free to believe it or not because it's made up. Totally. So again, like it kind of opens that Pandora's box of like, is mental illness the same as a physical illness? When you look at it, not so much. So yeah. But awesome. We could start going down that path and talk.
Yeah, I know. Forever, which I love. These are my favorite kinds of conversations. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a joy, and I'm glad that we did it despite some of our perspectives, although ironically, pretty aligned. They just don't come across that way when we look at LinkedIn. Yeah.
It's just the danger of social media. That's why
exactly.
Friends on social media, because they're just ridiculous.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again and have a great day.